Code Geass is an excellent anime. It has a great cast of characters, an amazing OST, incredibly interesting themes, and a stellar plotline. Yet despite all of this, I found the anime grating for much of my first watch through because of one particular character who I could not stand. Lelouch's best friend and rival, Suzaku Rururugi. I frequently found myself criticizing his actions and ideology. His mere presence in a scene took me out of it. But my dislike of this character gradually grew to appreciation, as the glaring flaws I saw in his ideals were addressed and used to develop his character and the story's themes. As I learned more about Suzaku, his ideals were recontextualized, and I began to see him in a new light. Suzaku is, at heart, a character living in a prison of his own making, a man living a lie of his own telling. And Code Geass forces Suzaku to face his past, confront the truth, and commit to atoning for his mistakes. In doing so, Suzaku proves to be a perfect foil to Lelouch, and perhaps the greatest example of what I found to be one of Code Geass' most interesting themes, the moral ambiguity of lying. Code Geass is all about lies. The lies we tell each other, the lies we tell ourselves, and the context through which those lies are right or wrong. At the start of Code Geass, Suzaku is telling a poor and destructive lie. He lives as a soldier of the evil Britannian Empire, adamant that only through working in the system can one come to change it because means never justify ends. This is merely a lie that he is trying to make come true. Japan, or Area 11, is relatively better off compared to other regions of the Britannian Empire because they surrendered before fighting a costly and unwinnable war. But as we later learn, the only reason this happened was because of Suzaku. When his father, Japan's then Prime Minister, decided on a path of scorched earth resistance against the Britannian Empire, Suzaku murders him to prevent Japan's destruction. From the outset, the peace Suzaku treasures and pledges to maintain in Area 11 is only possible because of patricide, one of the most sordid means one can think of. This blatant hypocrisy in his mindset and actions is only visible in the full context of his story. Without that, he comes off as preachy and ignorant, blindly adhering to an obviously flawed ideology while getting in the way of Lelouch's plans, which on several occasions were close to coming to fruition. This is the tension in his early appearances. He's wrong, obviously wrong, and I viewed him as an idiot for the way he acts. But his backstory reveals him to just be deeply deluded. He wants to condemn himself for murdering his father by rejecting the way of thinking that led to those actions. He has to believe that the ends don't justify the means because he's guilty about robbing the Japanese people of their chance to fight for themselves. He simply wants to face punishment for his actions. If Suzaku is annoying for saying the same thing over and over again to Lelouch, it is only because he is really saying it to himself continuously to reinforce his belief in his lie. But Suzaku at this point is telling a lie all for himself. Rather than truly confronting his actions and atoning for them, he meaninglessly pushes himself for the sake of self-satisfaction. He is suicidal. He doesn't plan to really live out his so-called ideals, but rather expects to die and achieve personal peace. The earliest example of this is Suzaku returning to the Britannian authorities with the full understanding that they are trying to pin a crime on him and execute him. I originally saw this as idiotic, as he was constantly proclaiming his belief in an obviously rigged system. But in understanding him, I learned that he was aware of that. He wanted to die, to feel judged for his previous crimes. This is why he is so enraged when Lelouch commands him to live with the Geass later on. It makes him a walking contradiction. A man seeking death, but forced to live by a curse. As well, people are actively hurt by this lie. It hurts his relationship with Lelouch and prolongs a civil war that causes his own people to suffer and consumes the woman he loves. For a long time, as he gains power within the Britannian framework, it almost feels like he is making his light true by supporting the ever-honest and idealistic Euphemia. But a lie told for selfish reasons can never end well. The one causing change is Euphemia, not him, and he can't accomplish anything as he is. This becomes clear to me early on, when he attempted to stop an assassination attempt on Jeremiah. He was powerless to do so with his ideals, and it was Euphemia's selflessness and influence that saved the day. Despite being her knight, he draws strength from her to reinforce his own ideals, because he's been unsuccessful on his own. Beyond this one example, there are numerous times when Suzaku's actions don't save the day because he can't accomplish anything with his half-hearted ideals. His greatest success up to this point in the story was working with Lelouch to resist the Japanese puppet forces backed by the Chinese Federation. During this fight, Yuffie tells him that she loves him, not to hate himself, and that he needs to live. These words encourage him to fight side by side with Zero. This should be a contradiction of his ideals, as the ends of saving the day are only possible by the means of working with a known terrorist. But in this brief moment, Suzaku gives up his selfish wish to die and resolves to live for others, which in turn allows him to actually save others. To live his lie would mean to die and hurt Euphemia, so he finally starts to understand that clinging to his ideals is selfish and destructive. He isn't all the way there, but he does have some meaningful change. Soon after, he breaks the rules by not turning Callan in despite knowing her ties to Zero. He does this in order to protect her, evidence that he's becoming more flexible in his ideals in order to truly save those he cares about. But losing Yuffie casts him into confusion. After losing another loved one, his answer appears to be to double down, blaming Zero for the tragedy he experienced. But he can't stomach his actions as well as he did before, because he has experienced Euphemia's genuineness. At times, he seems willing to break his ideals. He vengefully attacks Lelouch, lies to Nunnally to advance his plans, and almost uses refrain on Colin. Yet he also thrusts himself deeper into his delusion by dedicating himself to becoming the Knight of One, the ultimate example of trying to work within the system. He determines that taking everything on himself is the way to properly atone, but his efforts are still selfish and misguided. Yuffie didn't want him to hate himself or to hate Lelouch. She didn't want him to suffer or make others suffer for his ideals. She wanted him to embrace life in the future. And the turning point of this is Lelouch's confrontation with Emperor Charles. Lelouch and Suzaku reject the Ragnarok connection because Charles and Marianne don't truly care about making the world a better place for others. They are making it better for themselves. In this, they are executing a lie of their own, sacrificing the wishes and will of others to satisfy themselves. Kanon had earlier told Suzaku that you can't make the world a more forgiving place just for yourself. Code Geass constantly punishes those with selfish intentions, those who deceive others and themselves with the goal of creating their personal ideal outcome. This is exactly what Suzaku was doing through much of Code Geass, putting his own ideals of how to punish himself over the feelings of others. But in rejecting the Ragnarok connection, Lelouch and Suzaku reject the idea that a world of forced truth is good. Suzaku notes that Yuffie and Shirley never exposed Lelouch's Zero, even at the end. It was important to protect the ones they cared about, which in that case required withholding the truth, by lying. Throughout the series, we see how the masks people wear can be used to protect others. Lelouch protects Nunnally by hiding parts of himself from her. Callan deceives her classmates in order to protect the Japanese people, and Lelouch lies to Rollo as he dies to make him believe he was truly loved. In order to make up for stripping Japan of its will long ago in the name of self-punishment, Suzaku pledged to help Lelouch. The new world they are trying to create is different from their earlier ideals. Rather than doing what is best for them, they seek to realize the ideals of Euphemia and Nunnally, a world where strangers can get along without perfectly understanding one another, regardless of what that means for either of them. When confronting Lelouch about his actions as Zero and Yuffie's death, Suzaku remarks to him that if you're going to tell a lie, live that lie until the very end. Here at the end, Suzaku embraces a lie, but this time it is for the betterment of others, which in turn acts as his way of atonement. When Suzaku takes the oath to become Yuffie's knight, he pledges to abandon selfishness and wish to be the sword and shield for the sake of great justice. When Suzaku originally takes his pledge, he is still more concerned with dying to atone for his past than he is with protecting the future. But in rejecting Ragnarok, a world without lies or any sword means, he acknowledges the wrongfulness of his past persona and that he never had been a true knight of justice. He also makes the choice to fake his death, put on the mask of Zero, and embrace the lie, not for himself, but for Euphemia, Nunnally, and the world. He wanted to die, but the world is not so forgiving as to let him choose his own manner of atonement. His curse and punishment are instead to live, move past his regret and self-hatred, and protect the future as Euphemia's knight. He isn't suddenly redeemed or over his psychological issues. He is simply a man seeking his redemption by playing out the role that is required of him, even if it contradicts what he wants. Like he once said to Lelouch, he has to live out his lie to the end. Lelouch pretends to be an evil mastermind and dies keeping up that act for the sake of world peace. Suzaku spends years portraying himself as a knight of justice, and is obliged to spend the rest of his life committing to that role, no matter what pain he incurs or how much he wants to quit. The key difference is his intent. Suzaku has shed his selfish goals in favor of accepting an outcome he did not desire to protect society and the wishes of his lost loved ones. In forcing him to live with his mask, it also gives Suzaku another chance to stop hating himself. There are still people he cares about and those who care about him. There are those who might suspect who he is, know everything he does, and still accept him. With the hope of being accepted by others, Suzaku might one day be able to love himself, which was Euphemia's final wish. Code Geass is to me a show largely about lying, and in the end, what determines the morality of a lie is the intent. Those who engage in untruthfulness for the sake of their selfish goals or ideology end in ruin. Lelouch and Suzaku's failures throughout much of the series reflect men with selfish intentions hiding behind righteous words. The conflict over whether one believes means matter or don't isn't as important to me as much as how Lelouch and Suzaku justify their actions. Lelouch's selfish embrace of ends over means as a fake villain was just as wrong as Suzaku's selfish embrace of means over ends as a fake hero. Once they embraced their own lies, they were able to do something to help people other than themselves. Suzaku is given a potential path to redemption by committing to this future, which for him feels like a punishment as a man eternally stuck in the past. But I think that Suzaku's conclusion has a lot of hope in it. Lelouch describes Geass as a wish, to be able to do something that one cannot currently do on their own. In a way, it's almost like a lie that one hopes to make true in the future with the assistance of others. If Lelouch's Geass on the world can lead to true peace, perhaps the Geass he placed on Suzaku can become his reality, as he commits to working with Nunnally and the others to protect the world. With the right intent, a lie is but a fantasy, where the caster dedicates themselves to making it a reality in the future. Suzaku's redemption can be found in his choice to embrace his new role embodying the ideals of Euphemia's hero of justice. To be truly selfless. To become zero.